Welcome to Actualize, a podcast focused on the intersection of performance, ambition, and mental health. I'm your host, Rob Pintwala. My goal for the show is to not only celebrate success, but also shed light on the challenges and sacrifices that come with ambition. Actualize is brought to you by First Session. Launched in 2019, I started First Session to help you find the right therapist. First Session is purposely designed more like a dating website than a clinical website, as we're completely focused on helping you find the right fit the first time. My team and I interview and vet our partner therapists, so you can simply browse videos, see who you vibe with, and instantly book a session. Check us out at firstsession.com and see why more than 7,000 Canadians have chosen First Session to find a therapist. This episode is with Alicia Mccarvell. Alicia hails from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and is an absolute force of a person, content creator, and entrepreneur. She is dedicated to making the lives of others better by encouraging them to be comfortable and confident in their own bodies. As of now, Alicia has amassed over 1 million Instagram followers and 6 million TikTok followers. During our conversation, Alicia opens up about the grief she holds for not living fully for 8 years when she was ashamed of her body. She talks about what it means to be and feel worthy as a whole person. I ask Alicia about the compassion fatigue that comes with inspiring others by being vulnerable and open about her relationship with her body. Alicia talks a lot about setting boundaries and taking care of her mental health as an influencer and someone who faces a lot of judgment through her platform. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Alicia Mccarvell. Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Actualize podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. Talking is my favorite pastime. So,
Well, I love just jumping right in. So, I wanted to start with something that I found on your feed that said, until the age of around 28, you didn't think you were worth taking care of. Yeah, I was wondering if you could start by
elaborate.
expanding on that. Yeah.
I mean, to get into the nitty gritty of that actual, I guess to dive deeper into that quote, I didn't know I was really taking care of myself until I was 20. And then from the age of 20 to 28, I didn't know I was worth taking care of. And what I mean by that is up until I got into university, I moved my body through sport. I did all of these really cool things to take care of myself, and never really once did anybody say, "Oh, you're doing a good job taking care of yourself." It just was. And then I got into university and I was no longer competitive in sport anymore, and how I needed to move my body and take care of myself became very different. Your mental health takes a shot your first year of university.
Yep.
It is really the first time in your life where you are very much alone, no matter how much support you have. And from the age of 20 to 28 is where I really, really struggled with my body and what it does or doesn't do for me. And I put on that freshman 15 that people talk about, which was very much a freshman 50 for me. And then from then on there out, everybody told me, well, you need to lose weight. So you need to do this. You need to take these things. You need to try this. You're getting fat. You can't wear that. You don't get to do those things anymore. And you can't be successful if you're in a fat body. So you have to have a thin body. So immediately once my body started to change, everything around me told me that I had no value until I was thin. And the quote that you're referring to was the moment when I was, 28 and on a beach in Florida, realizing that it really didn't matter what my body looked like. I was worth taking care of. I was worth enjoying my life. I was worth seeing and doing cool things. And in that 8-year span, there's been a lot of ups and downs and do's and don'ts and to get me to where I am right now at 33. But that changing point for me definitely was on a beach in Florida. We went on vacation. I wore a bathing suit for the first time in probably 10 years. And I realized how much time I was spending or how much of my life I was spending worried about others, like worried about what other people think or playing into the narrative that I was not worthy or didn't deserve certain things. And then to go out and experience something that I thought I hadn't been worthy of for so long, to realize that nobody cared that I had it. Nobody cared that I was on the beach in a fat body. The only people that cared was my husband, who had missed out on that opportunity with me for years because I didn't allow myself that type of joy. And it was really eye-opening to me to realize that living your life is taking care of yourself. Like, living and, whether it's going for that promotion or it's working hard or if it's dressing the way that you want to. I had this idea that I wasn't worthy until I was thin, but I was worthy all of this time. I just needed to start making decisions for myself and not allow others to be, sitting in the back of my head. And from that point on, that's when I decided that my body wasn't going to be the reason I said no to anything. And it's been 6 years of allowing myself to be worthy of taking care of, being worthy of experiences, being worthy of movement, joyful movement, not movement that is going to cause weight loss, movement that brings me joy, back to that, like, childish freedom of sport, the way that we used to move, and it never was a big deal. So, and it's been the happiest 6 years of my life, these last 6 years. And f to believe that I spent a good period of my life thinking that I could never have that unless I was in a thin body has brought along a lot of grief, and I'm sure we're gonna talk about that. Yeah, that quote itself was just a lot of, I didn't think I was worthy until I dropped kind of those expectations of everybody else and started living my life for me and honestly, in full transparency, for other people. Because sometimes making decisions for yourself can be hard, but when you realize how important the decisions you make for yourself are on other people, it makes it a little bit easier to make those tough decisions. And definitely at the beginning of saying yes to things, I feel like I was saying yes for other people and not necessarily for myself. But 6 years later, I know when I say yes, I'm saying yes for me because it's what I deserve. And the experiences that I've gotten to have because I've said yes have been life altering. So
That's incredible. What just want to dive into the actual kind of day that happened in Florida. Was that kind of like a fluke, like, or was there like, how did you get encouraged to like wear that swimsuit and go on the beach, or did it like that realization, like, do you remember how that actually like came about?
I think there's a mixture of, I don't think anything is necessarily a fluke in life and in general. I think
Hmm.
that by this point, I was a pot that was ready to overflow, with how I was feeling with my body, with how fed up I was with, myself and my life and what I was and wasn't doing. And the choice to wear the bathing suit was very much I'm going to Florida and nobody's gonna know me there. So who cares if
Got it.
I'm in a fat
Got it.
body on the
Got it.
beach? It was very much well, we're gonna do this because who cares what anybody thinks. So the act was a choice. What happened afterwards definitely was not anticipated. Like, I remember being on the beach and Scott and I were in the water for like probably 2 consecutive hours. Like, I don't even know if we got out. And we're just playing and laughing and having such a good time. And then when we got back to where we were staying and I got in the shower, that's when it like hit me like I nothing has ever walked my world like that moment standing naked in the shower, just realizing that, like, what was I doing? Like, what have I been doing for the last 8 years of my life? Not allowing myself those moments. And like it's not just one emotion, which is so confusing because in that moment I was angry at myself for not allowing myself that joy. I was disappointed that I had held my husband back from that experience for so long. I was sad at all of thinking back to all of the experiences that I had said no to. I was scared of this idea that all this time I thought my body was the problem, but it was just me. And like that'll rock you to the core when you've spent your 8 years blaming your body for being the reason why you aren't able to do something, and then you do it and you're like, "Oh shit." So it wasn't my body. This has nothing to do with my body. I was already kind of on my way there because in the midst of that 8-year battle with my body and movement, I had done a bikini competition. I was 24, I think, when I walked across the stage. I was the thinnest I had ever been. And when I walked across the stage, I remember looking at myself being like, "You look like shit." And being like, "Okay, so my body's not the problem because here I am standing the thinnest I will ever be in my life, and my head is still not happy. Like my brain is still not, working with me." So I was already pre I was already at the point where I knew my body wasn't the problem, that my head was the problem. However, when you're then living your life with everything telling you, "You can't shop here, you can't look like this, you'll never have joy until," or "I'm the happiest when I'm thin," it's hard to believe your own head is the problem when the rest of the world is also telling you that that's the problem. Like, it's a numbers game at that
Mhm.
point. So yeah, I mean, I the choice it was a choice to wear the bathing suit, and then afterwards it was just this overflowing of emotion that I had never really experienced before, and to be honest, I don't know if I'll ever experience it ever again. And then since that day, I've carried and will continue to carry grief with me everywhere I go, and we talk about grief and when it comes to like loss of people or things or like pets, or we talk about it when it comes to like a tangible loss of things that can be seen or were seen, but we don't really talk about the grief that comes along with like the what ifs or
Mhm.
the loss of time, like grieving the loss of, you know, m- my life essentially. So I've carried that with me ever since then, but it's been a choice to say yes since that day. So although
Mhm.
those feelings weren't anticipated, it's been a choice since then, and a lot of things within that 8-year period led me to choosing to wear that bathing suit that day, and I will be forever grateful that I did because they talk about, like, needing to hit rock bottom in order to, and I don't I don't know because I think that that was my rock bottom with my body. I think I genuinely feel like there's nothing more humbling than, standing in your most vulnerable state naked somewhere and just not having a clue where to go from there, and I think that, like, was my rock bottom, was experiencing all that joy and then standing there thinking, "This is your fault." Like, "This has nothing to do with anybody else. This is your fault." So, I think that's the closest that I'll ever get to rock bottom, and if that's what it is, then it makes a lot of sense because I was forced from that day to make a lot better decisions for myself and for the people that I love.
Yeah, yeah. When you sort of sounds like you sort of put the blame towards yourself, was there and is there still, like, how have you kinda dealt with that guilt, or has there been guilt involved in, like,
Oh, yeah.
feeling yeah.
I mean, I understand that it is not all my fault. I understand that I live in a society that has told me that me being in a fat body makes me less valuable than others. I'm not naive to the fact that there are outside sources that are also guilty to contributing to that narrative to me, and however, I'm a grown ass woman that makes her own decisions and can make these choices for herself, and I always prided myself on my ability to be me, like, be authentic to myself. So, yeah, I carry a lot of grief because I realized that I spent a lot of those years trying to be somebody else, trying to fit a mold, trying to look a certain way, and I grieve that. I grieve the part that I played working at a fitness facility and the narrative that I might have created for other people. I grieve the time that I lost saying no to things. I grieve the years that I don't have photos, that I simply look like I don't exist as a human being. You know, I tell
Mm-hmm.
people that I've been
Mm-hmm.
with my husband for 17 years, but I would go on a limb and say 4 of those 17 years I don't exist on paper. Like, I don't there's no photos of me, there's no videos of me, there's no, you know, I grieve the decisions that I made for my body, which has gotten me to the point that I am at now. I've done a lot of damage to my body physically, mentally, and I will continue to pay for that as I try to, like, heal those wounds and move past that. But yeah, grief is grief is heavy. And
Yeah.
it's also a really valuable teaching tool because everybody knows in a way what grief feels like, but nobody connects. I shouldn't say nobody, but not often do people connect the feeling of grief with lost time. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's kind of been a catalyst for my message to say, well, I don't care how harsh it is of me to tell you that you're being ridiculous by not wearing those shorts. But I do think that if you understood the way that I feel about my past and not choosing these things sooner, that you would understand that it's not mean, that this is coming from a place of love, that it's, the way you feel it needs to change for your body, for yourself, for your loved ones. And yeah, it's been a motivator for me too. Like, I mean, grief, I think it is for a lot of people, but
Mm-hmm.
for me specifically in this type of situation, like grieving grieving the lost time and the lost memories and the lost adventures and the lost, you know, opportunities has also motivated me to like never miss a single one ever again. And
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
motivated me to put myself out there. That's motivated me to say yes to things that terrify me in order to make up for time that I have lost. So I do think I've lived a much more fulfilled 6 years of my life because of the grief that I do carry. I just want people to get to their point of realization or rock bottom before it took me to get there, so they don't have to
Yeah.
carry as many years of grief as I am carrying, so that
Yeah.
weighs just a
Yeah.
little bit less for them. Yeah, so that
Do you feel?
I've just kinda made it my mission to just, not fear talking about it, but, like, helping people understand that it's not getting to a good place with your body isn't like you cross this, like, wonderful finish line and everything's beautiful and wonderful. Like, there is a lot of sadness that comes along with it. Like, it is like, there is more to it than just living blissfully in your body. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot that I'm still working through. There's a lot that I will continue to work through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel, and I'm not yet at that experience with grief personally, but do you ever, from what I've read, I guess, and witnessed, it seems like time is the only really thing that kind of dissipates some of that grief. Do you feel that that's happened, or do you feel some sort of like extra attachment to that grief as like a added reminder that this is why, and the motivation part that you mentioned?
I think I think that, yes, when we talk about grief, we talk about, the our lives that just get filled with other things, and I think that it's less about the time and it's just more so about the fact that you've had more time to fill your life with other things than just
Mm-hmm.
that
Like,
grief to, like, sit on it. I think my experience is a little bit unique because I'm grieving lost time. So,
mm-hmm.
to grieve lost time, then yes, obviously having more time gets rid of that grief a little bit. However, it's I'm not I'm not necessarily filling my life with more things, and every joyful movement or moment that I have or every good thing that I do have will continue to be a reminder of what I could have had. So it's a little
Right.
bit different, I think, when we grieve the loss of people. Yes, some things remind us of them, but not everything we do. And I think for me, in this experience for me, is that anytime I do something that I could have done years ago, that reminds me of that grief. So
Right.
yes, yes. I think that as time goes by, I'm gonna be filling myself with so many more things that is gonna make up for the years that I've lost. However, every time I do something that I thought I was never capable of or didn't deserve or wasn't worthy of, it's just a reminder that I always was, and I could have
Yeah.
been doing it sooner. So, that's a great question, and I don't think I've ever really thought about it like that, but I think it's the same, but also just a little bit different when you're grieving lost time because time's attached to
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, I think a lot of folks have maybe a less intense experience with that type of grief with COVID for a lot of people who
Yeah,
like put everything on delay or, depending on what age you're in and how you look at that. But I know that there's a lot of
and I'm
grief
sure that
still,
there's other
right?
experiences that are attached to this too, like, I can only imagine that hypothetically, you're in an abusive relationship and you leave that relationship, I can assume that you would also grieve the time that you
Yeah.
lost with that person too, so I can also anticipate when you leave a job. I know that experience that you've given a lot to grieving the
Yeah.
time that you could have been doing something that you loved more that brought you more fulfilling. So I'm sure that it's not just this is just unique because it's has to do with my body, but I'm sure that
Yeah.
there are other things that people grieve like this that if when the good things do happen you grieve that, and I try not to live in the past, and I think that that's like really important. I can't get
Yeah.
back those 8 years. They'll never that's unrealistic, and I can't get back. I'm also 33 now. What I could do at 23 is very different than what I can do at 33, physically, mentally, emotionally, like, those are just 2 very different things, but what I try to do is put myself back in those positions to, like, is this somebody am I doing something that 23-year-old me would be proud of? Am I doing something that 25-year-old me would be proud of? And I think that that's kind of how I kind of rectified those years. And yeah, I have other things like I take all the videos, I take all of the photos. There are other ways that I kind of help with that grief. And for me, which like I get emotional talking about, but I've never been able to give myself wholeheartedly to anybody in this world. I've never been able to say yes to everything. I've never been able to be present for everybody, whether that was showing up to a friend's birthday party because I felt uncomfortable in my skin, or that was taking the pictures instead of being in the photos. Whatever that looks like, there's been nobody in my life that I've ever been able to show up for authentically at 110% myself. However, my sister gave birth to my nephew 2 years ago, and the joy and the excitement that I feel to say that he'll never not see me and everything is like a really, really cool thing to be able to give him. And I joke about it because he's like a 3-year-old boy. Like he has no understanding on what that is. But
Hmm.
I know that for him, whether he's 3, whether he's 16, whether he's 30, he's gonna be able to look back on his photos and his life, and I will always be present, I will always be there, I will always say yes, I will always take the photo, and, like, that's pretty fucking cool. Like, I think that has helped a lot with my grief is that there are a lot of people who go through the life that don't ever get to give themselves 110% to anybody. And to say that I get to do that for him is, like, really, really cool. Like, he'll never wonder where I am. I and I've said this in the like, talk before, but I do want it to be annoying how present and how, yeah, I'm there for everything because I think that that's just, like, a gift in itself, not only for him, but for me, because now I get to say that been able to do that for somebody, so, obviously, like, grief is real and heavy, but there's just so much more now that I'm on the other side of it, that there's just the joy, the life, the, like, adventure, the fulfillment I feel in living my life will always forever outweigh the grief. But yeah, there's days where I do feel like sadness with the things that I messed up I missed out on. But then again, as I said earlier, I don't really think that I think that everything happens for a reason. And I think that I've experienced my life the way that I needed to experience it so that hopefully now having the confidence to share it, I can help others not have to experience it the same way that I did. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it's really deep. It's really, really deep,
Hmm.
filled with lots of different things, but as shitty as the grief can be some days, the adventure and the life that I lived in the last 6 years is far surpassed any life I ever anticipated for myself, and, you know, how can you be sad about that, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. No, it's very beautiful what you're saying, and really can relate to what you're saying about your nephew too. And
Yes.
that's, yeah, it's super beautiful and inspiring, and even for people, yeah, who don't have kids and just want to be part of someone's life, yeah, and showing up for the whole time. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's tough with anyone for sure.
Well, and I see it in
Well,
moms, like, I see it in moms who DM me to tell me that they don't go to the pool with their kids, or I see it in, parents who are choosing not to do certain things with, like, and just that hurts my heart because you've been misled. Like, you've been made to believe something that is not true, and watching those same moms send me a photo this year of them on the beach with their kids is like a dream come true for me
fuck,
because,
that's awesome.
like, how can you I don't know, you can't really put a price on experience, and to know
Yeah.
that, like, my impact is one that, you know, I'm lucky enough to say that it, like, has generational impact, It's not just that mom that's gonna be impacted by wearing that bathing suit on the beach, it's those 2 girls that are going to watch their mom live and have adventure in her body in that bathing suit on the beach, and hopefully, if that happens enough time, then those 2 girls will never withhold themselves from those experiences because it won't ever matter. So it's yeah, it's really fucking cool. Like, it's really, really, really cool when you get to see those, like, real life moments, and it sounded silly at first, and when I was sharing my story and people were like, "Oh, clothing doesn't have that impact," or "These things don't have an impact." Until you've been there, until you've, like, experienced it that way, like, you don't really truly understand the power of a bathing suit on a beach in Florida. Like, you just genuinely don't understand it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's kind of where that grief hits me the most is just, like, grieving what I, missed out on, but I have definitely turned that grief into, like, a catalyst and a motivational point to help people get to their moment of realization before they have to experience it the same way that I do.
That's that's so real, and it's also challenging. Like, and that's I imagine it could be challenging, And I wanted to ask you about. I know we started off pretty heavy here, but I wanted to ask you about. Like, I've actually been learning a little bit more about something called compassion fatigue, and I think a lot of people who identify with compassion fatigue are most commonly in healthcare or therapists who I work with a lot, nurses, doctors. But it sounds like you have chosen to, yeah, lead this charge and try to be a positive influence to so many people that are now following your journey. But it also sounds like a lot of these stories, even the positive ones, really hit hard.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you I mean, I know, first of all, like, I know you're hilarious and your videos are so funny, and like, you have an amazing sense of humor. Imagine that's one way to kind of
Yeah.
deal
Yeah.
with it, but like, how else do you, like,
I mean,
how do you deal?
I think we genuinely do underestimate the impact of comedy and humor. I think we do as a actually, I think we did until COVID. And I think that a lot of people relied on abstract comedy, which was online and videos and content and TikTok and Instagram to help get themselves through, those really tough days. And I am a firm believer that humor is healing in many different ways. And I mean, it depends on what therapist you talk about when you talk about dark humor or joking about certain things. But I also know that if you're not laughing through it, you might be crying through it. And at the same time, there is just so much joy and laughter to be found in life that even when we're struggling, I my goal for me and for my audience is to help people understand that, like, I learned through working with the Bloom Academy, the Avery Francis.
Mhm.
She owns it and she's in Ontario. She does a diversity, equity, and inclusion training specifically. And one of the things that she taught me, which has been extremely valuable to like my journey with myself, is that two things can coexist at the same time. Things that we have been made to believe can coexist. I can be joyful and funny and laugh about something, but still respect that it's a challenge and something I need to, maneuver even though I'm making a joke about it. Or I can
Yeah.
be super proud of myself for doing something, but also disappointed that I, didn't achieve a different goal. So learning that two things can coexist at the same time has really been helpful for my brain to help me understand that I can be teaching a really serious topic and I can take this really seriously, but I can also make jokes that other people are going to find funny, which is going to make this work a little lighter when they're taking it in. This work is heavy, so like obviously we jumped into it and it's heavy all the time because there's just so many things that go along with it. There's so many parts, and if you've got children, that adds a little extra into it. If there's just so much when it comes to our bodies and how we feel about them and what we do and don't allow ourselves to do, that people wouldn't do the work if there wasn't a little break. So I like to think that my humor in my content is not only a break for my audience, but also a break for me to be creating
Yeah.
something that doesn't hit so heavy. So yeah, you might go through 2 tough videos, but here's going to be 6 really funny ones to kind of give yourself a little break while you like digest what you've literally just taken in. So I think comedy for me has always been and will continue to be a staple in my life and in my content because life just fucking shitty sometimes. And the humor and laughter and finding joy really helps us understand that two things can exist. It can be really shitty right now, but there's still really good things, going on, and we can still laugh, you know. So yeah, comedy for sure. For the other part, I really had to digest the I'm an empath, and I really had to digest that I'm never going to be doing enough for people. And, like, swallowing that pill was important for a few reasons. My DMs are filled with people saying, "Can you share this GoFundMe? Can you post about this? Can you tell this story? Can you talk about this? This is what I'm going through. This is the person in my life that's died. This is my" DMs are filled with that, and I can't
Yeah.
help every single person. And learning that I can't do it all made it a little bit easier on me to understand that my resources just don't exist to that extent. I can't be posting. My goal is to make people live a happier, healthier, more fulfilled life in whatever body it is that they have. That is my goal at the end of the day, and I need to kind of stick to those things. So understanding that I can't do enough has allowed me to kind of pick and choose without beating myself up on what I do help with and what I can't help with. And yeah, you add in parasocial relationships into that conversation when it comes to being a content creator. And I'm very understanding of the fact that, you know, I am I am a million people's common interest. A million people follow me on Instagram. A million people are commonly interested in me. I put out an authentic version of myself. People like me. People want to be my friend, and people want to have an as much of an intimate relationship as they possibly can with me. And I'm grateful for that because that was the space I was hoping to create, was one in which you could walk into and feel like I am your best friend and I am telling you that you need to make a change for yourself. But with that comes the other side of friendship, which is the belief that I have a buy-in to every single thing that those million people are also bought into, which can be really, really complicated because that is not the truth. That's also not how all of our friendships work in our life. People aren't bought into the same causes, to the same things. So navigating that and understanding what a parasocial relationship is has been very helpful for me also, to be mindful of how people view me, but also to be respectful of my own boundaries in certain situations. So yeah, it can be complicated. To be honest, I do a lot of like my own DMs. So like I don't believe in handing that off, which can be heavy, but I have it scheduled. So that's kind of the one thing that I do for myself, is that I schedule out times when I'm going to be consuming that information so that I
Hmm.
know that I'm in the right headspace to be doing so. And I create a safe space for me to be consuming it. So whether that's from my bed or if that's watching a movie comfortable from the couch, I just make sure that I'm in a space where I can be digesting that information. Sometimes I sit down to write back to TMs for an hour and it's all happy go lucky and it's all good. And I don't have to worry about that. Sometimes you'll have, three heavy hitters right into the get go. And that's all I have the capacity for in terms of like writing
Yeah.
back or supporting. But one thing I think I've always been good at is regulating my capacity for emotion in like stressful situations or just situations in general. So yeah, I schedule it out and then I work until I don't have the capacity to do so, and I'm like honest with myself on that. And then I just realize that I'm never going to be doing enough. I'm going to disappoint
Yeah.
people. And that's how parasocial relationships work, and that's how this space will work. I'm not going to be able to make all million of these people happy, but my goal is to help people live a happier, healthier, more fulfilled life in their body. And I do think I can do that for a million people. I might not be able to help every single SPCA that's out there. I might not be able to support every single food bank. I might not be able to donate to every single GoFundMe, but I can make sure that you're living your true authentic self, which is going to make you much more valuable to those causes going forward, is kind of how I have to mind myself around that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get the sense that there's a lot of sort of wisdom and just learned experience and boundaries and
Boundaries are your best
like I've
friend.
never even, yeah, I've never actually heard of the word parasocial
Parasocial, yeah.
relationship. I mean,
Yeah.
that is like everyone has those. Like I guess I would have those too if I follow, folks with a big
Yeah.
audience. On this like boundary setting, and I think you mentioned you've always had the, I think, like wherewithal to understand your emotional capacity or like when you
Mhm.
can show up. Has that come natural, or have you had to, like, have you worked at this? Like, it sounds like you're someone who's done a lot of introspection, and you like even the words you use talking about how you feel and like your emotional vocabulary seems very deep. Um,
Emotionally, I think I've always had that. I don't necessarily know where that comes from. I think that just comes from the fact that I've always been interested in people's emotions and I've always been interested in mine. I Although I'm really good at understanding my emotions, I have a 0 to 100 capacity with my emotions. I'm either crying or I'm yelling. Like I'm very aware of how long I can be in a specific. I had an incident at a, this is just a funny story. I had an incident at a hotel recently that I was staying at, and the manager accused us of lying about how many people were in the room. And I know myself enough to know that my integrity is my whole being. So when you come for my integrity, that I know that I'm one or the other. But in that situation, I knew that I couldn't talk to either of the people who had accused me of lying in that situation. So I walked to the front desk and I was like, I need to talk to somebody that's not those two people. And I was like, and I need to say what I need to say, and then I need to walk away because otherwise I know how I am going to react to situations. So sure enough, I got to talk to somebody different. I spoke for as long as I had the capacity to do so without crying or getting upset. I gave my full information and I walked away, and it was a much more effective and efficient conversation because I knew that in that sense. So let's not confuse emotional awareness with ability to control emotion, because I definitely don't have the ability to control it. But I think I have also been always, I'm sure this is an impact. I've never been the best on the team. I've never been the most valuable person, but I've always been the person that I've worked the hardest. That is who I have always been and will always continue to be. So I think that I'm very good at looking at what I hate the word detriment, but what my downfalls are or where my areas of opportunity are, and then working around them in the most effective way, which has made me able to kind of control those things. Like I said before, I worked with a fitness brand for almost 8 years. I was in the capacity of management. Being a manager of people will teach you a lot. When you're managing a fitness facility with X amount of members plus your own staff, you'll learn a lot about your own emotion and how to speak to people and how to get the most out of your interactions. So I definitely think that has built me. When it comes to boundary setting, I've had to teach myself that over the last 6 years. Because when you finally start, and I say 6 because when you finally start living your life for yourself, even people who love you will challenge that space for you, regardless
Yeah.
of if it's the best for you or not. I can't unlearn for other people. I can only unlearn for myself. And I put in a lot of work unlearning the things that I've been told about my body and my value. I can't unlearn that for the other people in my life, but I can set a boundary with them. I can. And it's been a lot of accepting responsibility for what I've played in that part. So, I know in the past I've laughed at the jokes that you've made at my expense. However, going forward, I don't think those are funny. I was too uncomfortable to tell you that, but I don't want to be the butt of your jokes anymore. And so it's been a lot of those conversations to say, I know in the past I've allowed you to talk about your diet in front of me, but I've been too afraid to tell you that makes me uncomfortable. Going forward, to protect myself, I don't want to be a part of your diet culture conversations anymore. It puts me in a
And
harmful
you'll have these
space.
conversations?
Yeah.
You'll have
So
these
you just have
conversations?
to,
Yeah.
you kind of, and I mean, can we go for anything? I mean, it can go for us, it's also, we don't want children. How many times I've had to tell people, I understand that you think it's, okay to ask people if they're having kids, but that's not a comfortable question for me, nor something I want to discuss with you. We're not having children. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And it can be a joke at first, and then eventually you have to set, I'm not having these conversations. And luckily for me,
You have a million children on Instagram that you already look after.
yes, yeah. And and luckily for me, I have really supportive friends, really supportive family, and I haven't had to uphold any of those boundaries to an extent of I'm no longer speaking to you, or I'm no longer, I haven't,
Yeah.
had to disconnect from people in my life. And I do think that if you deliver your boundaries, and accept your responsibility, and sometimes that can be a little bit easier of a conversation. However, there will come a time where I will have to uphold a boundary, and
Yeah.
it won't be,
Or move on.
and I won't have to, I just can't cultivate that relationship anymore. And I'm going to be a lot better for it eventually. But yeah, boundaries they're not fun. They're the least fun thing you'll do, because most people take offense to a boundary. And that just in my mind comes from the relationship that you have with that person and what you've allowed to happen in the past. And it's really hard when you tell somebody, oh, you can't make those jokes anymore. They're like, well, we've been friends for 20 years and I've been making those jokes for 20 years. And then immediately that guilt sets in, and that oh no, what have I've been hurting you? It's just a normal reaction to be like, well, you just let me do that for 20 years. So why all of a sudden can't I do it anymore? So yeah.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side of boundaries. Everybody probably has been on the other side of boundaries. And you immediately, a normal reaction is to feel guilt. Oh shit, I thought you thought that was funny. Or I
Yeah.
thought that was an okay conversation. I'm also lucky too, because I share my life online. So it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise to my friends what I do and don't want to talk about. I'm very lucky in that sense that I know that there's typical conversations that would happen when I'm not around. And I'm okay with that. And I like that my friends and my family make the choice to have those conversations because it is harmful for me. And I don't want to have to, be the bad guy in those moments to,
Yeah.
walk away from something. But so I am pretty lucky in a sense that I share it all. And it kind of allows me to set boundaries without having to be in person with a lot of people, which is one of the nice parts about being a content creator, is because I don't have to have a conversation with my aunt I've already said it online. I know she follows my content. I know she's aware of my stance on certain things. So
I don't know if you
yeah,
Y-
it's one,
I was I don't know if you need to be a content creator to like I have 600 followers and my mom
yeah,
follows me, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
And I mean,
like
just
she
sharing
knows that
it,
I'm up to.
honestly, just sharing it open and in that way has been like helpful. And, making it make sense too. Like, I think sometimes when it comes to like boundaries or relationships with other people, we assume that the people that we love should understand it. But like a lot of the people that we love have never had boundaries even set to them. They don't even know what a boundary is. So with
Hmm.
me having a space like my creating content, I have always had the patience and the time to explain something because I don't assume that everybody understands, which has helped me be a little bit more understanding and patient in my real life as well. So,
Yeah, what you're saying back there sort of reminded me of a feeling that I've gotten with some people, particular like former bosses that I've worked for, that I feel like when I joined their team, I was young. It's like 10 years ago. I was like naive, and just like worked, put on the owner hat and like was definitely inexperienced and still am in many respects. But what I've noticed is that they still hold me to that like 23-year-old, like newcomer, new to the workforce level. And like I can't escape that in many respects. Like some of them have become my friends and they just still hold me in that like small place. And I'm like, it drives me nuts. Right.
yeah.
Cause like, yeah. And I'm so like, yeah, I mean, I ultimately like, had to like leave that company because I mean, probably maybe I wasn't the best person for the job I wanted, but at the same time, it's like these people hold me smaller than I'm holding myself right now.
Hmm.
So I have to leave.
Yeah. And I think
Um,
I will. I don't know the content creator's name, but this sucks that I can't give her credit. I watched a video. I'm sure someone will know it. I watched a video of a lady talking about how there's so much stigma on like leaving a job and going to a new one that like we as a society believe that you work your way up within one job. Like you find your niche and then your goal should be to like work your way to the top of that. And that when you look at a resume, businesses will look at longevity rather than actual like growth and development. And she did a comparison between one person who had worked at the same job for 10 years and their growth in pay, and then showed another candidate who had worked 3 jobs within that span of the 10 years and the growth in pay and how drastically different and how much more money the person who had left their job to go to a new job was making in terms of their financial versus the person that had stayed in the position. And it was literally that exact conversation that sometimes you'll never outgrow the people around you. Like in their head, you'll never outgrow that. But when you move to a new position and like take the things that you've learned with you, it makes you more valuable in another space for other people. And yeah, I'm sure there's I'm sure there's a therapist who would have a lot to say about how that like and what that works in our heads. But yeah, definitely that like sometimes you'll never outgrow the people around you. You have to kind of create that new space to like bring that grown person elsewhere and can be more valuable. But yeah.
yeah. How how do you sort of think about that in your personal life? Like, and just to add one quick kind of anecdote is that I think the most important factor before my wife and I got married was me getting on board with, I'm someone who wants to constantly grow and work on myself and all those things, but I that's what I really wanted to see in my partner is that do they have that kind of capacity to remain open to growth and change, or are they like kind of stuck in their ways? And I think that once I kind of like determined that, I was like, okay, this is perfect. Or maybe not perfect, but this
I know
will
what you mean.
this is enough. Yeah. How do you think about that in your relationships? And I like you've done a ton of personal growth. I can
M-
tell.
My mother, like, my mom said something to me. I was super frustrated with a friend. And my mom said, that friend has been that friend since you were, 16 years old. The fact that you think that that friend will change who they are, and you have two choices. You either expect them to change or you accept them for who they are and you understand that going forward so it doesn't bring you grief or pain or, you know. So that comment from her has been really helpful for me to accept people in my life for who they are and not who I think they necessarily should be in certain areas. And like I don't necessarily know if that works for everybody. And like I can speak from my personal relation, like obviously with Scott, we're also a different breed. We've been together since we were 15 years old. So we've had no choice but to grow together, to change together, to, challenge each other to see new things. However, becoming a content creator was never on either of our bingo cards. And it just was never something that we anticipated for either of us. I am an extrovert. He very much is an introvert. This space is an extroverted space. Like being in the eye of people sharing your life. We've had to sit down and have a lot of conversations like about what he's comfortable with, what he's not comfortable with, what I'm comfortable with, what, I'm not comfortable with. And he is a prime example of someone who has stepped outside of his comfort zone so I can very much flourish in mine. And like I think that says a lot about a partner specifically. I
Yeah.
don't necessarily feel like this was always what he initially had like dreamt up for us, like to be sharing everything so fully and so transparently online. However, the life that we've been able to create because of doing so and the lives that he gets to be a part of changing has just been such a motivational factor. But yeah, I definitely think in terms of like growth in the people in our life in general, I think for my partner, that's what I should be able to expect from them is that type of like support and love. But I also return that in many other ways. Like I'm very respectful of boundaries and conversations that I know when to be filming, when not to be filming. And it's been a guessing game for the last, couple years of just kind of make it work. But when it comes to other people in our life, like that's some of the most valuable advice my mom has ever given me is that you make the choice on is it a battle worth fighting or is it something that you can accept about somebody and then not expect them. I think we're guilty of this as people and I'm wholeheartedly guilty of this. Like I want to give and do and I create these experiences. Like for Scott, we've had for him like decorated the bedroom with balloons and all of these like beautiful cards and writing. That's my love language, not necessarily his. And like learning that it's unfair of me to kind of place my expectations on others just based off of like how I would kind of, and that's really been helpful with like just people in my life and understanding the parts they play in this world as a content creator. I call it interaction or transaction. And it's very clear how that works in this world based off of who I'm having an interaction with and who I'm having a transaction with. And that's kind of helped me stick it to like a business perspective and not be offended in certain situations or not care too much in certain places to realize that sometimes I'm going to shake people's hands and it's a transaction. And sometimes I'm going to hug
Hmm.
people and it's going to be a genuine interaction based off of like the content and the things that I create. So I very much have broken down like since creating a lot of my life into making it feel like it's a business so that I can remove like my personal feelings away from it so that I don't get
Hmm.
as hurt or offended or feel as much pressure. And that's been super helpful for me too, in terms of expectations on others or myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to almost like kind of reverse it a little bit and ask you about your audience and how it's been as you've grown as a content creator and like with let's say I don't know your first like 100,000 or 50,000 followers, like have they been accepting of your success or do they like, like how does do they hold you to like where they want you to be this indie creator or something like
Yeah.
that?
I think that there's a mixture of everything. And I think it depends on why you followed me in the first place. I think that a lot of people got behind me and they resonated with me being an average human being or struggling with certain things, or, when I talked about my debt and, I think people really resonated with that stuff. So now that that stuff doesn't exist, if that's the only reason why I resonated with you, I understand why my space might not be the space for you. And it's been that, again, helpful for me. I'm not going to make everybody happy. I've tried to diversify my content as much as I can so that I often describe my content or my space like a house. And then I built in all of these rooms. There's a comedy room, there's a self-love room, there's a movement room, there's a relationship room, there's my life room, there's my finance room. And that's kind of the topics that I talk about. And you can come in at your own leisure, go into whatever room you feel you need to take from. And then if you walk in and there's no room for you, well, then maybe my content space isn't for you. And that's totally okay. Again, viewing it like a business rather than my actual life so that I don't get hurt when people do choose to leave, because that can be very shitty. There is a quote, and I had this conversation on my stories not too long ago. Somebody slid into my DMs to be like, "You're not relatable anymore." And I'm like, but what does that mean? Like, what relatable into what sense? That I can afford to pay my bills now and I'm not struggling like I used to, or because I'm going on vacations paid for by brands, or because you don't resonate with me struggling in my body anymore because I'm not struggling as much. Like, where is it that I'm no longer relatable? And another content creator was having this conversation about how it's like the number one word being used against female creators now is that you're not relatable anymore. I can't relate to your content. You've outgrown. Obviously, it's terrifying in certain spaces, especially a space about your body. Like, I'll get both ends of the spectrum. If I lose weight, so if I continue on this journey that I'm on with my body, we're building a home gym. I started eating more than one meal a day. If I continue on this journey and my body changes, am I going to lose people in the space? Probably, because some people only resonate with me being fat. And if I'm no longer fat or my body changes, then how do they resonate with that? But that's not a me problem. And that's a them creating a boundary that they have to uphold for themselves. The difference being my boundaries aren't the responsibility of other people. My boundaries belong to me. So when people come out to say you're no longer relatable, well, that's you making your boundary my problem. And your boundary is not my problem. That's your boundary that you have to uphold. So if you are no longer feeling safe in my space, or you don't feel like you resonate with me, that's not on me to continue to fit a mold that you're looking for. That's on you to move me from your following and find people who follow that mold. So again, breaking it down to a more technical term, then making it about me and myself, and understanding how unreasonable it is. Like, I have 2 siblings. I can't make them happy on the same day, let alone, a million people online. But again, I also think that as a society, we've allowed ourselves to think that we have to believe in everything that somebody says in order to follow and support them, or we have to buy into everything that they do in order to follow and support them. I think that 2 things can be true. I think that you can resonate with my comedy, but also not be struggling with your body and still support me. I think that you could be struggling with your body and not find that funny and still support me and still want to be in this space. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance with that specifically, but again, that's a personal boundary. And when people vocalize that to try to like make me feel bad or make other creators feel bad, that's them putting their boundaries on other people, and that's not how boundaries work. Like, boundaries are a personal thing, especially when it comes to content you're choosing to consume. I didn't choose you chose me. And like, sometimes that's like really important. It's also the power that we have with social media. Like, you're in control of it. You get to choose who you do and don't see when it comes to socials. So like, picking people who make you feel good about yourself is important. There are lots of fat people out there and people living in bigger bodies that don't like my content. And that's okay, because I used to live in my fat body and not like people who lived in fat bodies and were living happy, healthy lives. I just never thought it was for me. I never thought I could get there. I never thought it was a realistic space. So it was hard for me to like resonate with somebody who was doing cool things in a fat body. I resented them. And so when that does happen, I understand that feeling because I've been there. I've thought those things. And my space might not be for you yet, but that doesn't mean it won't be for you in the future. So, just come back when it's for you and leave when it's not. And I'm okay with that. And we are going to grow. My life is I've been able to do incredible things because of sharing my story. I paid off my sister's debt. We got to bring my siblings to Disneyland. There are things that I have done that I never fathomed being able to do for myself, but I don't deserve to feel guilty for those, those things. And yeah, I often find my therapist said to me in a conversation that obviously for me, like, this analyzing things helps me separate who I am from my actual content, which I think is really important as a content creator. And there's a lot of people who will be upset with me for doing things that they would do if they could do. And I understand that. Yeah, I understand people being upset that I paid off my sister's debt, because why not you? And I've been in that position. Like, why not you too? Like, why can't you also be able to do that? And I wholeheartedly empathize with that. But I don't have to feel guilty for making that choice for me and for my family. So yeah, it's been a lot of like, I have a full system for negative comments. I have a full system. I very much made my online presence a business and like filled with like these formulas that allow me to like step out and be the owner rather than like the content in itself, so that I don't have to kind of carry every single burden or feel every little piece, because content creators don't necessarily deserve to feel every little piece,
Yeah, I think it almost feels like, to me, it's the only way to survive what you're doing. I mean, I think it sounds like you're doing it well. I can't relate, but it's interesting because this sort of podcast has taken a bit of a focus on speaking with influencers. I've spoken with a number of influencers now, and like, I'm so interested in how you maintain your mental health. And
there's a lot of us that are not doing a good job, and like it comes in ebbs and flows. And I think too, like, it's not necessary. Well, we can talk content creator and influencer because that's the biggest thing right now, influencer marketing, content creators, etc. But like, I think that this has a lot to do with, like, we have no support. We're individuals. We don't have an HR. We have nobody protecting us. There are laws that protect what we can share, but there are no laws that protect me and my DMs. There are no laws that protect what happens to me or who says what about my character or what is allowed in an online space. I can't share an ad without fully disclosing it, but somebody can hide their identity, get my address, and then try to hold it over my head for a period of time with absolutely zero repercussions. So I think too, this space is huge now. Like, this influencer space is huge, but content creators have nobody. And there is definitely this view of, but you have money, so you should be fine. If you have money and you're making all of these dollars, you should be fine. There's no amount in money that gives you personal security. Like, there's no amount of money that you can have that helps with your mental health, or sure, it gives you access to things, and it is a privilege to have access to things. However, there's levels to all of it. But yeah, like, there is no HR. I don't go to when somebody abuses me in my space, I have nobody to go to. It's not like when I worked a typical 9 to 5 and could go to my boss and say, and those people aren't even always being listened to. So it's kind of a hard space to exist in without separating yourself from it and without treating it like a business. And I learned that pretty quickly because I am just the type of person that takes everything to heart. Like, obviously, this bit, like, I'm sharing me. So when people say, "I'm unfollowing you," I'm like, "Well, what did I do? Why is this so," like, and I had to step away from that because sometimes it's nothing that you do. Sometimes it's you protecting your boundaries that causes people to leave, and that's valid. You're allowed to do that. Sometimes it's what somebody else says about you is why somebody chooses to unfollow you, and you can't control that. So, yeah, it definitely is an interesting topic, and I do see it popping up a lot more now because I do think that content creators and influencers are starting to get a little bit burnt out and tired
Yeah.
and just wanting to find spaces and ways to kind of like protect themselves. And yeah, it can be a very like scary place to exist in
Yeah.
online. But yeah, for me, those are separating me from my content has really been what's made like the world of difference when it comes to like not feeling the full impact of all avenues, the good and the bad.
I think my interest is motivated in the millions of people who might not explicitly say that they're aspiring content creators, influencers, but that are or seem to be. And I think, again, from my perspective, I think a lot of folks are going in blind without the realization of what actually happens. And I love this conversation for that.
There's so much more to it like that, and I completely wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. However, content creators live in this world where what can I complain about? You just saw me last week walking a walkway in Miami. You watched me fly up there, spend a week on a resort, and walk a runway in Miami Swim. When I open my mouth to tell you that I'm being bullied online or abused by people or like personal safety is being 9 times out of 10 I'm met with, "Well, you signed up for this. This is what was going to happen when you share your life. You should expect that this stuff comes along with it." And I always have been and will forever be the person that I agree I should expect it, but I don't have to accept it in my space. And that's why people hate it when I call people out or I do things to protect my safety. I want to do this forever. I want to share my life forever. I want to help people live happier, healthier, more adventurous lives in their bodies forever. But I can't do that if this is a space that isn't safe for me. So I have to take that seriously. That's why I use the block button. That's why I call people out when they're in positions of power and they're having the wrong conversations about bodies. That's why I turn the comments off on some of my things. That's why I protect my space. Because if I don't, then how can I ever expect to do this forever? So yeah, I agree that I think people are going in blindly, but I think that a lot of creators and people in the space are afraid to share because we know what we will be met with. I know the comments. I know what is. I shared the other day that I don't eat enough. Like I transparently shared with my audience that I have had issues with binge eating in the past. I have overcome those within that like 8-year span of changing my life. But now in this new era of my life, I'm not eating enough, which can be just as detrimental to your health as eating too much or binge eating. And I shared that and immediately was met with, "You're lying. You're not telling the truth. That's not a real thing. You're fat. How could
Hmm.
you possibly be?" So it's just one of those things where I think that like the truth is out there and people are willing to talk about it, but like the spaces have to be safe enough in order for like the reality to really sink in for people that, yeah, my life has changed. I've been able to do really cool things. I'm very grateful every day that I don't have to look at my bank account to make sure that I have enough money and there for rent. But I've worked really hard for that and like I still don't deserve to be abused in the space that I create and the job that I do online, which is why I have used like the techniques and the things that I have used to kind of separate myself from it so that I'm not always feeling like I am my space or this is me, just so that I can kind of protect my peace a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's super badass. So I applaud you for that. That's incredible.
It's been
How
I mean, I'm still learning. Things are still growing, like, the culture around content creators and content creating and, the audience wants an authentic person, and you want people to be real, but not too real. We don't want
just
to like,
double-edged sword, I hear.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like a little bit of everything, and I think for me, understanding that it's gonna always come from both sides. I'm never gonna I choose not Personally, I choose not to talk about what charities I donate to or how much I donate, or when a cause comes up, I don't post my receipts for the people that I'm donating to
Yeah.
or the things that I'm doing. I figured that out right off the get-go because it doesn't really matter what number it says. It'll never be enough for people.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
never be giving enough to. So I removed the expectation of others, and I just allow my own expectation to sit there. So I donate to
Yeah.
who, at the amount that I feel comfortable and able to do, and then the only expectation that exists is mine, because then that's the only person that I
Yeah.
have to kind of live up to. Because when you do share, it's not enough, or it's to the wrong people, or it's, there's just a lot of things that come along with, like, obviously being in this light and open, and you can expect a lot of it, but I think that a lot of content creators are moving in the direction of not accepting it in their spaces anymore, and even apps are moving in directions of making it a safer space. Like Instagram and TikTok have added in features that allow me to block out certain words, like my address from my comment section, so that if anybody tries to like dox my address, it automatically gets flagged. I can pick certain words or certain names and I can put that in the comment section so that if anybody tries to use those words, it's automatically blocked. I can
Nice.
allow only people who follow me to comment on my videos. I can allow only people who follow me to slide into my DMs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even the apps are starting to move in like a more
Yeah.
safer
Well,
space.
makes
Well,
sense.
they make their money off of
Yeah.
content creators. They should probably be creating safer spaces. But even the
Totally.
apps are seeing like where are some of the areas, and they're starting to like crack down on making it a safer space too.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Well, I know we're short on time, so I wanted to ask one more
Yeah, shoot.
quick question. And recently you had an awesome post about kind of glorifying your life and how you want to glorify, all the parts of your life. And just wanted to hear your sort of definition of like what that is and
Yeah.
like to unpack that in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Being a fat person, I often, when I live my life where I'm doing like the most mundane things, it's like a photo of me reading a book. Because I have a following, people will say, "Oh, you're glorifying obesity." Or when the minute I say you don't have to hate yourself in a fat body, people are like, "Oh, you're glorifying obesity." And it really, really got to me. Like really, really gets to me because my goal again is to make people live a happier, healthier life in their body. And that looks completely different for a lot of people. And for me, a happier, healthier life is in a fatter body than when I was 127 pounds and doing horrible things to my body. So I was frustrated with those comments, and that was specifically right after the Nick and Shawn Mendes, or Shawn Mendes. No, you're gonna have to put. That was right after the Knicks and Sean Desmond. He's gonna kill me that I said that. Video came out, and like Sean had posted the video first, and like I have my comments like Fort Knox. Like people can't. There's certain things you can't say, and they're like just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
again to protect my peace. And that's not the case for everybody else. So when other people share your content, sometimes it can be a little bit like rough. And yeah, people are like, "Oh, except for, the fatty glorifying obesity or blah blah blah." And all I was doing was dancing in a dress. Like literally dancing in a dress in a video. And yeah, I got frustrated. And I was like, "Okay, well, if we want to talk about glorifying something, I do want to glorify life. I want to glorify what it means to live your life at any and all sizes. I want you to look at me dancing in a video, in a Sean Desmond video, something I never fathomed to me doing, and say, I could do that, because you can." And like, we underestimate what representation or how the impact that representation truly does have. But genuinely, when I was struggling in my body at 22, oh, like There were no people who were living their best life in a fat body. It just wasn't. 10 years ago, there just wasn't. And I want to be that person so that when 22-year-olds like me look at themselves and their fat bodies and then look at me, aren't thinking that their life is over, because that's what I thought at 22 in my fat body. I thought there was no joy left for me, that until I got thin, I couldn't do these things. I want the 22-year-olds who are trying to figure out how to live their life, because you're 22, you have a whole life ahead of you, to realize that they're just as worthy of dancing in a Sean Desmond video, of working out in gym gear that looks cute, of going on a beach vacation, of taking photos with their significant other, of expecting the people in their life to respect their boundaries. Like, I want to glorify that so much that when people who look like me see me, they never ever think they have to devalue themselves, because if she can, then why can't I? And I think that if I would have learned that I was valuable at 22, I wouldn't have done as much damage to my body as I had done to it 8 years after that. And I think that there's so much more power in making people feel worthy than making people feel like they're not worthy until. And like, I truly wholeheartedly believe that someone is more likely to make the right choices for themselves because they know they're valuable than to make the right choices for themselves because they're not valuable until. And those are two different mindsets to be making decisions. I made a lot of decisions for myself out of hate, and it wasn't until I knew that I was valuable and worth taking care of that I started making decisions for myself with love. And that's what I mean when I say I want to glorify life. I want you to watch me eat a burger on a patio with a beer at 4 p.m. on a sunny day downtown Halifax, because you're worthy of those moments. I want you to watch me choose to swim at a beach and take those photos and feel sexy and feel confident, because you are worthy of that no matter what your body looks like. And if I can glorify that enough, then it won't take people so long to the decision that they're worthy to do those things. And if I can be the catalyst for that, then I'm willing to take the rest of the shit that comes along with it. So I know that the world will continue to become and be a better place when everybody understands their worth. And that is just the truth. They'll make better decisions for themselves. They'll make better decisions for the people that they love. They'll go for the jobs they should be doing, not the ones they think they have to do. And like, I might not ever see it in my lifetime, but I think that when people know that they're worthy of cool things, they do cool things. And yeah.
So inspiring. And thank you for sharing that, and yeah, just being who you are. I think we're at time. So a quick plug, where can people find you? And we'll add it all to the show notes. And
people can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Alicia Mccarvell. And then I also co-host a podcast called Your Two Cents, which is a little bit off topic of what I usually talk about, but it talks about all things money, finance, saving, to like your perfect wedding, to DIY, to thrift, like a little bit of everything. Yeah, those are probably like my main two platforms, and then my pod.
Awesome, Alicia. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your wisdom and your light and your inspiration.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Actualize podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as all other episodes, at firstsession.com/podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.